anyone like to ask a question from the floor? Okay, Mike, you go first.
You guys both involved international examples, either of drawing works, projects around the world in ways, communities, practice. I just wonder whether there are particular inspiring examples for you guys or for us in the room of kind of global communities of practice and discourse around drawing, perhaps particularly as it relates to education, higher education, because I suppose we were talking earlier on a little bit about histories of UK higher education, art, design, drawing, and so on, but I just wondered about this kind of global perspective. Obviously there's only a certain amount one can do in one day, but I just wondered if there are any particular gems you
I want to put a plug in for Chloe Briggs. Oh yeah. BRIGGS. Joe. Her drawing is free. She's based in Paris. I know that's not that far away, but Paris is a very interesting centre for drawing. The drawing art fair that they do, I think her activities. She works from this absolutely beautifully generous position of what drawing can offer people. So she works within the school, but also she has this program called Drawing is Free, which does loads of kind of drawing events, workshops, whether they're in the park or I think she's a rare thing. I certainly put a plug in for her. And the people I was working with in New Zealand were really interesting. One of the organisations is called Drawing Open. There's also an interesting person that sort of set up Drawing Open, Emma Fev Richards. She's researching drawing and Alzheimer's in particular, and she how you can use drawing to maintain cognitive function. So it's for quite a specialised thing that she's doing. But Ken, it's just really interesting. She also runs drawing and meditation within the art school as well. Those are just, I'm really bad at names, but those are just two individuals. So I'm not necessarily talking about schools because this is often about individuals and making connections to people.
Yeah, I mentioned there's a lot of individual work going on with people like surgeons, people that aren't necessarily part of the drawing community, but who used to appear at things like the Drawing Research Network and Thinking Through Drawing. A guy whose name I've forgotten, of course, will immediately come to mind as soon as I finished, but he was a head and neck surgeon who spent a lot of time.
What's that?
Francis Wells?
No, good, try again. Him as well.
I've definitely heard that name.
Yeah. That's the guy, yes. Thank you. And speaking of international symposia, we have an American friend with us, Seymour Simmons, the third. And I think Seymour would be able to tell us about what's going on in terms of drawing research across the States. Speaking a little more locally, we have in Swansea a community-based group of spaces called the Elysium Gallery, mainly run by graduates of our MA program at Swansea, and they are revitalising the whole city in terms of what drawing can actually mean for a community and how drawing can be used throughout the schools and throughout the community in order to bring people together to make a community of drawing. So the Elysium Galleries are a good example of that.
Thank you. And there's a person behind Mike. Oh yeah, there you go, Kelly.
I'm still thinking about the first three presentations, but at the beginning of yours, Howard, you talked about a kind of moment in the Industrial Revolution where drawing got sidelined. But I keep thinking about, I think currently the drawing suffers a little bit because everybody thinks that it's art. And I'm just
Yeah, it's research that's worth doing, and I haven't done it, so not much to say about it. But this notion of the 3 R's, I did research, and I found out that it's quite recent, about 1800, and the guy that invented that little motto, whose name again I've forgotten, was so influential in terms of the school curriculum, because suddenly drawing was just ditched. They didn't need people who were good at drawing. What they need, I say this sort of industrial revolution, sort of society in general, what they needed were people who could read, write and count. And reading, writing and arithmetic rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? The fact that writing doesn't start with an R, and neither does arithmetic. At least routing starts with an R. And routing is a good old-fashioned word for drawing. So I'm saying reading, routing, and arithmetic. If you'll excuse me with the apostrophe to eliminate the A in arithmetic. That's what we've got.
Fair enough.
I know at Bath there's an Institute of Education as well, so there are many teachers that are trained. And I know it's in my targets to kind of see actually how can I have a conversation with people that are learning to be teachers. And again, drawing's quite good at subterfuge. Can you get? I mean, I used to spend a lot of time drawing maps at school, and geography was something I really like doing, and I'm still not over it. But so it's like, how maybe we can slip it in there, or maybe we can get more drawing in there. So I think that's another kind of. In response to that, if you stop calling it art and just make it an activity, just like, let's just draw these math problems, or and how that's certainly a conversation I'm hoping to kind of develop a little bit. I mean, and again, I'm not an expert in this field. I know there are some, but it's something I'm curious about developing.
Yes, down at the front. This isn't a question, but in relation to that. In a school in Bath, I was an artist involved in a school that actually was the teachers that did a Cambridge primary review on drawing. As they taught drawing to primary school children throughout the whole school, the first thing they found was they had to teach the teachers how to draw because they were terrified, they didn't know. And then once the children started drawing, they got really frustrated in their drawings and this naivety was lost, and they wanted to, because the things didn't look like what they were drawing, so then they had to teach them how to draw. It was quite interesting. That's a Cambridge primary review.
Yeah, I don't know where you're at with this, but I am anxious to draw in front of students. So I share that kind of, because I don't know how many of you feel comfortable, I'm just going to draw in front of my students. But what happens when you do that? When, again, it's this community of practice idea, where you share your practice. I don't mind sharing a finished drawing, but to actually draw in front of someone, that's really, really
We make
hard.
a point in our first year drawing classes of drawing together.
Yeah.
We kind of state that that's our aim at the beginning of our drawing programme in the first year, is that our workshop to do it, we were going to draw together, including us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go first. Yeah, I'll remember you and you go first.
It's just more of a point. I was fortunate enough a few months back to meet Glenn Brown, and he did a drawing in a book for me, and I learned so much from watching him execute those actions. It made the entire drawings on the wall make complete sense. So it just kind of fused, and just going on from that about learning with your art teachers as well. It reduces that anxiety. Well, I found that anyway.
He is a virtuoso, though, so it's a bit annoying.
And Jake.
Just to reflect on what you were saying, Tanya, about communities of practice. I do a lot of life drawing, and I go into universities and sometimes work with students, sometimes I'm working in secondary schools, but most of the time I'm working in an adult education sphere or in a more informal sphere, kind of like community life drawing classes. It's always a very exciting place where we do get a lot of students coming from universities into that setting, a lot of teachers and a lot of practicing artists, as well as non-artists that are keen to integrate drawing into their lives. And I think what the adult education sphere is very good at doing is teaching skills in a practical way, because people are paying for courses and they want to see outcomes, which is always very kind of meaty and kind of meaningful in the moment, but I think can lack conceptual rigour. And what I found in universities is that obviously there is that conceptual rigour, but there is often a lot of discomfort in departments with the idea of teaching skills in case that in some way stifles the practice of students. And I understand that as well. But the only real intersection of those two communities, of that kind of practice-based, kind of skills-based learning in the adult education sphere and the conceptual learning in the university sphere, is really in the students going to be informal life classes, or informal communities that, sort of other communities of drawing, online communities, or sort of urban sketching communities. But I wonder whether you have any perspective on the best ways to integrate those communities actually from the top down as well as from the students, because it's the students that will end up back out in the kind of world outside the university ultimately, and often they come into those informal spheres afterwards, so that does reintegrate them. But there's often very little communication back to the universities again, and certainly in the adult education sphere and in the kind of more academic sphere, I really feel the lack of conceptual rigour in people's practice, and it would be great to integrate that without the need for university education at all. Most people aren't going to go and study drawing or even an art course or a drawing related course at university. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be bringing the conceptual rigour into their day-to-day drawing. I just wondered if you had a perspective on the intersection of those communities. Other than here, which is great.
I suppose I would hang on to the idea of practice. I think drawing is a practice. I find that a more useful word than skill because you just have to keep doing it, and that's how a drawing practice evolves and gets better. I would say whatever situation you're in, say if you're running a life class, there are lots of questions about being in the life class that will just, and I'm sure they are part of your teaching. It's not just about this is how we use charcoal or something. There's a big conversation about the situation you are in, just that room you're in, what you're doing, the intensity of it, what happens to you physically, your relationship with the model. There's so many things. Obviously people have written huge amounts about it, but I think you can make those things happen in the room, whether or not you're saying this is conceptually driven or not. Those questions will be part of what people are engaging with. So I think there's a much more organic approach to how we think, how we learn, how we make sense of things. That's what all art's meant to be doing. It's just meant to be making us, help us understand things a little better. And that's all we can keep pushing out as educators. Okay, how can we understand this a little better? How can we know this a little better? So it's not a kind of big strategy. I go back to that, and I suppose I've learned so much from my students as well, that kind of circle of knowledge. I know the kind of idea of drawing with students, but it's also what do they want to know, and how do they find out what they know? That kind of experience of learning isn't top down for me. It never has been. I'm very uncomfortable about my current kind of job title because it implies top down, and it's just not what I think learning is about. So I don't know if that answers that question necessarily.
In part, I suppose one of the biggest struggles I've found isn't actually working with the students, who I think broadly students of all kinds have been very receptive to kind of both ideas, the idea of developing practice rather than skill, but of course, developing a substantial practice and the conceptual side. It's actually with colleagues on both sides. So the kind of the mutual snobbery on both sides on an adult education level, thinking, well, we get talked down to by university tutors that come to drawing classes, so we won't engage with that. And on the university level, there was a colleague said, I know some students have been going to life classes outside the university. It's fine as long as they don't bring that into the studio environment. And there is a disconnect there, and I know that a lot of students that I've worked with have set up entirely independently set up their own kind of life drawing class at the university, or other kinds of drawing classes like student-led drawing sessions, which are incredibly productive and very exciting. But they do reach a limit where if they're not finding a way to directly integrate that into their university experience, or into their community experience, then it does get quite repetitive in that they're making drawings from what one another can tell one another, and often just looking online for quite poor quality drawing education from sort of YouTube, which is certainly where a lot of people are getting their kind of first experience of skills-based drawing education that might help them to move beyond struggles they're practically engaged with. And I have found some colleagues very unwilling to engage with that because they're uncomfortable about the idea of pushing any singular notion of drawing, which I think is important to be aware of that, but I think there is still a discomfort to sort of fully engage, particularly if there's not a drawing course at the university. If there isn't actually a substantial focus on drawing within the environment there.
I think it's something we struggle with. Even I know we are a drawing course, we're drawing and print here. It's something we struggle with, the idea of skill and students' own independent practice, and where we want to take them with either one of those. How much time we give them for their work, and how much time we give them with the kind of skills-based learning, and what we're trying to tell them about what that skills-based learning is for, whether it's that we want them to produce results from that, or whether it's there to, the way I've tried to describe it is it's there to sort of bolster their practice, which is, it's a very tricky line to, path to kind of navigate down. So the expectations of students are kind of what yours are as well. I don't know. Should we have, there's two hands in the room, let's have 2 more questions, and let's have lunch, otherwise we're not going to have lunch. So, yes.
Just to build on what you just said, I've just graduated from BA Drawing at Falmouth University, and so that is a very technically driven but also conceptually driven course, which really focuses on making sure we have the skills needed to articulate what we're saying, and then we also are really pushed to understand what we're saying. So I think there definitely should be a connect, and we're really blessed that I went to an institution which pushed that understanding, and it would be really interesting to see that sort of throughout, really, because I think technical skill really shouldn't be put second to concept, and vice versa. They really need to work together, or you're really losing out on being able to articulate what you're saying. So I think yes, building that as well.
Thank you very much. And who is right? Yes.
Well, I was just going to say, I think sometimes seems like an artificial argument to separate concept from skills, because there's a particular kind of cognition that happens when more of the sensorium is being used in an activity, particularly as there's more of an understanding of the extended mind, where it's not just here, but it continues out. So I feel like sometimes conceptual seems like sitting on your hands, while you're trying to think about something that will then make.
Yeah. So thinking through, learning through making. Yes. Would you like to say anything more, or time for lunch? Time for lunch. See you back.